Okay, let's talk about a life that is centered on self versus a life that is centered on God. Okay. A self-centered life would be focused on myself. It would be me being proud of myself and my self-accomplishments. It would be my self-confidence, depending on myself and my abilities. I affirm myself. I pat myself on the back. I'm proud of myself. I seek to be acceptable to the world and its ways. I look at the circumstances with my eyes from a human perspective. And I choose selfish and worldly living. And that's what I said earlier. That would be so boring to me, to just be able to go anywhere I wanted, anytime I wanted, and then be bored to death. Okay? Now, a God-centered life. It would be me placing my confidence in God, depending on God and His ability and provision. Okay? I've had trouble in that part because I was a single mom for 6.5 years, or a little less, or a little more, not a lot. But yeah, that was scary. Being a single mom for about 6 years, and just living on very, very limited income. That's very humbling. I promise you that. Anyway, and I thought I depended on God and His ability on provision, but I really did get scared many times, A God-centered life focuses on God and His activity. A God-centered life is a person who's humble before God, who denies the self and pushes through, who seeks first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, who seeks God's perspective on every circumstance, His perspective on every circumstance, and who chooses holy and godly living. I do want to say something about denying the self and pushing through. I was doing a job with my husband. We do trees. We clear trees, or we take them down. He takes them down. And then I'm part of just me and him work together, and I'm the cleanup with him. So he's doing the cutting, putting the ropes up, and I might sit on the tractor with the rope and pull the tree at the very end when it's coming down, this way. Once in a while I do get a little panicky, but it's really crazy how when you're in the cleanup portion of the tree business, it is horrendous. It looks like a bomb went off, and these trees have just spilled their pine cones and the pine needles everywhere, and the little barks that come off and just spread everywhere. And this person's yard of whom you're working just becomes just like a bomb hit it. It's really ugly. And at first I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I was thinking of Scott, and I started to giggle, and it was a laughing giggle with a crying. But this was after 4 or 5 hours of doing it. And so by then I was very hungry, exhausted, could not see the end of it. We only had about 1.5 hours to 2 hours before the sun was going to be set completely. And I just started giggle, laughing, and crying all at once. And he's like, what's wrong? I said, I can't see this getting finished. Oh, I'm laughing, I'm crying. I'm looking around, and all I could think of, and I told him this later, is like a little boy who takes out his Lego toys. Instead of pulling one block at a time, takes that whole box and just goes whoosh. And then it's cleanup time, right? And so that little boy isn't going to want to clean up, because he sees it as a big, big job. All the yellow blocks are mixed in with the blue, with the green, with the red, purple, black, white, whatever, all of them together. And that's how I saw everything yesterday. And while I was starting to feel anxious and nervous, exhausted, because we had taken 3 weeks off, and then this was a very cold day. I think the highest got to about maybe 55. in temperature, and I was just worn out and beat and tired, and anyway, feeling sorry for myself, because ultimately that's what it was. So I started and we were working on 2 acres, so it was back and forth walking, a lot of back and forth walking to the fire pit, and then back to clean up and pulling and taking the tractor and putting the tree limbs into the fire. And I was doing the pine cones. And it's just, anyway, long story short. So I was really at a point of, I'm exhausted. I want to go home. I want to cry. I want to lay in bed. I want to cover my head. I don't want to take a shower. I just want to be home. I want to be secure in my blankie. And I really was being stupid. But I mean, I didn't go and bother my husband about that. I mean, he could see that I was not, it was just, I get anxiety and panic attacks just naturally. So I just said to myself, not my will, but your will be done, Lord. And I hung in there and I hung in there. My legs were starting to get crampy. And then I'm finally, when my legs start to get crampy, that's when I take off my shoes, and then I do my job in my socks. I don't care if a needle goes up in my socks and pricks my feet. I just can't stand the cramping of my calves. So anyway, long story short, we persevered. Scott persevered. Excuse me. I just had tuna. Scott persevered. I persevered. And it turned out to be a really, really, really good night. Enough that when we got home, we got to eat together and relax. Of course, we showered. Then we watched some TV together and went to bed. And everything was fine. And you know what else? I remember God saying, I am with you. I make your burden light and your yoke easy, because I am right here with you pulling this wagon. And then I just started sobbing as I was reaching the fire pit, you know. Yes, yes, yes. And so it's like it really transformed the whole situation, where I was seeing nothing but a bomb drop of 2 big giant pine trees, enormous, with these pine cones. I am not kidding you, this size. Not little pine cones like this size, but enormous, right? Spread out everywhere. And it was just awful. But it's okay. It's okay. He got us through, and that's really the lesson. I'll be back.